to South Holston Reservoir on tournament number 2. My back is against the wall. On average, to make the regions, which is my overall goal, I have to catch at least a fish per tournament to make it on the co-angler side. I have to catch 2 fish, at least 1 as a co-angler in this tournament. That being said, this lake plays into my hands. It's generally a clear water reservoir. So I feel pretty comfortable and pretty confident since I caught a 4-pound smallmouth last year on a swim bait out of this particular lake. This lake dams both the middle and south forks of the Holston River to form a lake that's 7,580 acres. This lake is home to all 3 species of black bass: spotted, largemouth, and smallmouth. Smallmouth being the dominant species and what most people will be targeting, but there's some big largemouth that'll come out of this lake, I'm sure, during the tournament. The good thing is the smallmouth size limit is only 15 inches as opposed to our stop number 1 where it was 18 inches. So last year during this event I only caught a single bass, but thankfully it was a 4-pound largemouth, which was good enough for coming into this season. I'm going to get to practice a little more. I'm really familiar with the lake, and I hope I'm going to build on that success. So let's jump over and look at the baits I think are going to play a role during practice and the tournament. So pre-practice on South Holston. Here we go. What do I think they're going to be on? So when I come out here right now, I'm not going to lie to you, I'm going to load up on some swim baits. I'm going to have some trout colors, and I'm going to have, of course, because this lake has a lot of clear water in it, my favorite, any sort of clear or the Ghost Shad by Strike King. It just seems to work on these clear water lakes. I don't know if they just don't get a good look at it. All those will be topped with, of course, my favorite, which is ledge head lures. I'll go back and forth between this particular Mega Bass Vision 110, which is the something bone color, but the chartreuse because I've got predominantly smallmouth in this lake. So my first swim bait, it's tipped with a 1/2 ounce ledge head, and it is a 5.5 inch, I believe, Major League Lures boom shad. We're going to follow that up with a 3 inch, and it is also going to be on a 1/2 ounce head, but we're going to follow that up with the 3 inch trout color boom shad. Next swim bait is going to be a Zoom. It is a, I believe, a 5 inch swimmer, and it is in crystal shad. It is pretty much transparent. Again, on these clear water reservoirs, I love to throw transparent swim baits. They eat them. If you are going to fish clear water, and when I talk about clear water, I'm talking about 10 feet or greater, minimum 6 to 8 feet. But if you're going to fish clear water, go pick you up a set of these or a pack of these. You will not and cannot go wrong. I have caught so many big fish on this bait, and it is a Shadalicious by Strike King Ghost Shad. Make sure you pair it with a ledge head. My favorite is the 6/0, either in a 1/2 ounce or a 3/4 ounce, depending on the speed that the bass want the bait ran. I'll generally start out with a 1/2 ounce, and I'll go from there. But that has caught me a lot of big fish in clear water. Now I do have a crankbait tied on. Crankbaits in clear water generally is something that I'm not going to do, but it's very overcast, or supposed to be very overcast. Well, it is very overcast here on our first day out on the lake, and they're giving actually some pretty brutal storms coming in later today. So I will throw a DT6 to a DT10. I like to throw the 10 because I can cover a little more of that depth until I kind of get honed in on what they want. But this is the brown craw color. Now I'll go back and forth between the brown, the red, and a shad color. Now this bait and the mega bass are kind of my two that I go into a rotation with when the water is, you know, 55 or lower. This is a little deeper diver simply because, again, we are talking about some pretty clear water out here. It is a Rapala Shadow Ramp Deep 11, I believe, and it is a slow sinking, so it's going to get down there pretty deep. You can see the bill on it. And I'll go back and forth. This is a silver, but today it's overcast, so more than likely they make one that has a little bit of a blue flash to it, and I really like that on overcast days, or you know, to reflect a little more color as opposed to just gray sky. I think the fish can see it better. Now I'll always have a jig tied on, and I actually don't have that rod out of my box right now, but generally I'm going to have on in clear water either a watermelon or a green pumpkin arky head jig, just so I can cast it out there and work some of the points and some of the rocky points. Probably going to tip it with either some sort of beaver style or creature style bait or a rage crawl, and just drag it around. Like I said, I'm just not going to pull that out. You've seen 100 jigs. So as conditions change, I'll definitely change up what I'm throwing. Now I will say on this lake, all this stuff, all this practice, it's probably not going to mean a thing, because the past 2 years that we've came to South Holston Lake, we've came and the bass have been what we call on the little green worm. And what that means is the bass are up and either spawning or starting to commit to the beds, and basically everybody and their mama pretty much pulls up and starts throwing itty bitty, like 4 or 5 inch green worm. And I mean, they'll throw it on everything from, you know, a Texas rig, a drop shot, a shaky head, wacky style. I mean, you name it, they'll throw it on everything. They'll tip it, chartreuse. It's just, you know, one of 100 million different ways to throw it, and it's just to each their own. And what ends up happening is it just becomes a slugfest. You know, you just got to be in the right area with a lot of fish, throw that worm out there, and start setting the hook. So let's go talk about the areas we're going to target. So South Holston Lake is our next stop. It's a smaller lake compared to most of the other stops. Like I said, it's a little over 7,500 acres, but it has a lot to offer. Now, generally, it is a clearer water reservoir or a clearer water lake, but this time of year with the rain we've had, it does tend to stain up. Right now, I would say the visibility in the lake, at least on the lower end, is anywhere from about 3 feet to, in some areas, maybe 5 to 6 feet. But 2 to 3 feet right now seems to be about the average throughout the lake. Now, on this lake, we're going to be coming into the tournament during the heart of the spawn. So most of the bass are going to be on the beds, and that'll be what the majority of the field will focus on. Since the primary species that most people will be focusing on will be smallmouth, I'll give you a few areas that I will be searching. More than likely, I'll be searching for spawning bass, bass that are up and on the beds. Probably not going to be focusing on the pre-spawners. So sometimes with the smallmouth in this lake, they'll stage just off the spawning area once the feed is over, and they'll just stay off deep. Since this is a clear water lake, they'll stay off deep, you know, 15 to 20 foot near the spawning area, and they'll begin to sort of group up and pair up before they move up on the beds. But one of the places that really I can show you is, you know, simply this little section. And you'll see here how the creek channel runs closest to this particular bank. And this particular bank is steep, and it has kind of a slate rock on it. I know you can't see that here, but that slate rock, and especially right in this area where it gets really tight, generally tends to be the area that the smallmouth tend to spawn on. They like to come up, and it's almost like there's shelves on those steeper banks, and they'll spawn anywhere from about 3 to 10 foot. And you know, you never want to discount your points. And a great spot to show that would be these two areas here, the hump and this point. You know, this is back in a cove, so it's protected, and smallmouth will come up on these areas and make beds on the humps and on these protected points. Even this point here, and even smaller points, for example, you know, of this small pronounced point here. So those are going to be the areas that I really focus on. You'll notice how the creek channel comes in tight. This little point and this little cove could be a great little spawning area. Of course, you've got your hump here, and you've got deep water, you know, pretty much all the way around it. You've got a fork here. That's going to be another great place to look. Here's another great point that you can see extends out into the water, gets real tight. So these areas, I'm not going to focus, you know, traditionally, you know, with largemouth, you're going to focus in the backs of the creeks, the very backs of the pockets. And there might be some largemouth there, but I'm going to really focus on the smallmouth for this tournament and see what I can get bit on. And it'll be places like this, and you can see this steep bank here. You know, there's a lot of stuff in this particular cove to actually work on and work with. Those are the areas we're going to be focusing on. Like I always say though, once I get bit on a particular bait, I'm going to change up and try a couple of other baits. As a co-angler, that's what you're looking for. You're looking for a few baits you can get bit on. So I'll take a few bites on maybe a particular worm or particular bait that I'm going to drag through their bed, and we'll move on to the next bait. All right, I hope this helps you guys. Like I said, the smallmouth in this lake, and this lake is just full of them. You can pretty much go into any of these places and find a few very good 2.5 to 3.5 pounders. That seems to be the average size that this lake will pump out, and I expect some big bags, and I expect a lot of limits in this particular tournament. You know the drill. Questions and comments in the comment section below. You know I love to talk fishing with you guys. Any questions about lake breakdown, map breakdown, let me know. I'm happy to answer them to the best of my knowledge. Like it if you like it. Don't forget to subscribe, and you guys rock.